All right, get ready because today we are going deep, really deep into this, well, pretty messed up case of Earl Richmond Jr.
Yeah.
This guy, a serial killer, just terror all through New Jersey and North Carolina in the early 90s. And get this, the guy was an Army drill sergeant before all
Oh,
this.
wow.
I mean, talk about a total betrayal of, the whole idea of protecting and serving.
Right. Like you'd think someone in that position would be, I don't know, upholding the law and not like completely breaking it in the worst ways possible.
Totally. And that's kind of what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it flips everything on its head.
It does. So to really get into this, we're using excerpts from his Wikipedia page.
Okay.
And we're going to we're not just looking at like the basic facts of what he did.
All right.
We're going to try to figure out the why, the motivation behind it all. We're talking multiple murders here. Two of the victims were children, and there's all these like intertwined relationships. You'll see, it's a lot.
Yeah. It's going to be a wild ride for sure.
Buckle up. So let's start at the beginning. Earl Richmond Jr. was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina in 1961.
Okay.
Now, details about his early life are, well, they're pretty scarce. We don't know a whole lot. But what we do know is that he ended up joining the military, and he actually rose to the rank of drill sergeant at Fort Dix in New Jersey.
Fort Dix, huh?
Yeah, and this is where things start to get really interesting and really disturbing.
Okay, lay on me.
So while Richmond was stationed at Fort Dix, a whole bunch of sexual assaults start happening in the surrounding area.
Hmm.
And one of these cases, it actually led to the wrongful conviction of a guy named Richard Stevens.
Wait, so an innocent man went to prison while Richmond was just like walking free?
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
It's terrifying to think about.
Totally. And it wasn't until like years later when Richmond finally confessed that the truth about those assaults and Stevens' wrongful conviction came out.
Oh, wow.
So it just makes you wonder, like, was this pattern of predatory behavior already there?
Yeah.
Like, was it already a part of him during his military service? And if it was, like, how did he manage to, I don't know, fly under the radar for so long?
That's what I find so crazy about these kinds of cases.
Me too.
It's like, how can someone live this, like, double life?
Right, like appear normal on the outside.
Exactly. And all the while, they're harboring this, like, darkness inside.
It's chillin'. It really speaks to just how complex human nature can be.
Totally.
But unfortunately, things were about to get much, much worse.
Oh, no.
Yeah, in April of 1991, Richmond committed his first murder.
Okay.
And the victim was a 22-year-old woman named Pamela Nadeau. She was an Army specialist, also stationed at Fort Dix.
Oh, wow.
And she worked as a payroll clerk, which is just, a normal job. And tragically, she crossed paths with Richmond.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, and the details of her murder they're just brutal.
What happened?
He tied her up, he strangled her, stabbed her multiple times.
Oh, my God.
And then, as if that wasn't enough, he used a hammer to beat her to death. It's just like, it's a level of violence that's hard to even comprehend.
Absolutely. It just makes your stomach turn thinking about it.
And what's even more disturbing is that after all of this, Richmond wasn't even a suspect.
What?
He was able to just pack up and go back to North Carolina like nothing had happened.
That's insane.
And that's where the story takes an even darker turn. Back in his home state, Richmond reconnects with a woman named Helisa Hayes.
Okay.
Now, he knew her through this like really tangled web of family ties. He had dated one of her sisters, and he was friends with her ex-husband.
Whoa. So he was like a family friend.
Yeah, basically. It's just chilling to think about her.
Seriously, it sends chills down my spine.
So it's November 2nd, 1991, and Richmond gets into an argument with Helisa.
Okay.
And this argument escalates into something absolutely horrific. Richmond rapes her, and then he turns his rage on her two young children, 8-year-old Philip and 7-year-old Darian.
Oh, God.
It's almost too much to even talk about.
It's heartbreaking.
So he stabs Philip 40 times with scissors.
Oh, my God.
Then he strangles him with an electrical cord. Then he takes the life of young Darian, strangling her with a curling iron wire. The brutality is just, it's beyond words.
Those poor kids. I can't even imagine what their father went through.
It's unimaginable. He discovered their bodies 2 days later.
Oh, God.
And initially, suspicion actually fell on Helisa's ex-husband.
Wow. So the real killer was just out there, like, blending back into society.
Yeah, and for months, the investigation went cold. It wasn't until April of the following year, 1992, that Richmond finally became a suspect. They brought him in for questioning, but he denied everything. But there was one crucial piece of evidence that was about to change everything.
Really? What was it?
So we left off with Richmond denying everything, right?
Right.
But they had him in for questioning. What was that piece of evidence that changed the whole game?
Well, it was a DNA test.
DNA.
Yeah. And back then, early 90s, it was still pretty new tech.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But it turned out to be like the key. It linked Richmond directly to all these awful crimes.
I bet the investigators were pretty relieved. Finally, like something concrete.
Oh, yeah. I mean, once those results came back, Richmond couldn't deny it anymore.
So no more denying, huh? What happened then?
Well, that carefully crafted, like, mask he had, it just crumbled. He
Wow.
confessed to everything, all four murders, Pamela the Doe, Halisa Hayes, and both of her children. He just laid it all out. And here's where it gets really creepy.
Okay, there's more. I mean, how could it get creepier?
Well, in his confession, he admitted that he left crews at the crime scenes on purpose.
Wait, he wanted to get caught.
Yeah. It's like, why, you think a serial killer would want to stay hidden.
Right, like disappear, blend in.
Exactly. But some of them, it's different. They need that attention, that recognition. It's part of the whole, I don't know, the whole messed up psychology of it.
So like a game for them.
Yeah, kind of. And for Richmond, he came from the military, that whole drill sergeant background. Maybe that made it even worse, that need for control.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like he was so used to being the one in charge.
Exactly, calling the shots. So maybe all that plus whatever was already going on in his head, it just, I don't know, created this perfect storm.
Wow. So confession, DNA evidence, what happened next?
Well, it got pretty complicated, legally speaking. His crimes crossed state lines.
Right, military and civilian victims.
Exactly. He ended up with trials in both federal and state courts.
That's a lot. What was the outcome?
Well, first, in May of '93, he's convicted in federal court for Pamela Nadeau's murder. Life in prison.
Okay, so life behind bars. You'd think that would be it.
Yeah, you'd think. But 2 years later, he went to trial in North Carolina for the murders of Halisa Hayes and her kids. And that time, the verdict was death.
Wow. That's heavy.
It is. I mean, think about it. The brutality of it all, the victims, the trust he betrayed. The jury must have been just horrified.
I can't imagine what those families went through. Just sitting there listening to all that, having to face him.
I know, it's unimaginable.
Yeah.
But those trials, they were about more than just, legal stuff. It was about justice, closure.
For sure. So, death row, waiting for execution. But, this is America. Did he appeal?
Oh, yeah. Multiple appeals. Pretty standard in death penalty cases.
Yeah, makes sense.
His lawyers argued everything, ineffective counsel, mental competency, you name it. But in the end,
Nothing worked.
nope, the courts upheld both sentences. So over a decade on death row, and then May 6, 2005, execution day.
Wow. A reckoning for Richmond and for all the people whose lives he destroyed. What about that day? Did he say anything?
He did. No last meal, just wanted to, say some things. He expressed remorse, apologized to the families.
Really? That's something. I mean, facing death, finally admitting what he'd done.
Yeah, there's actually a recording of his last words. He said, "I'd like to extend my deepest apologies to all the victims' families and their loved ones. I'd like to say that I'm not a man that shies away from his responsibilities. I'd like to say that I hope that now, through my death, that y'all can move forward with your lives. Thank you, and God bless you."
Wow, those are powerful words. But it makes you wonder, like, was he really sorry? Or was it just, trying to find peace before the end?
It's impossible to know for sure. What we can do is try to understand, like, what creates a mind like his, what makes a serial killer.
Yeah, we talked about childhood trauma, the need for control. But there's got to be more to it than that, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
This deep dive into Earl Richmond Jr.'s case has been, well, intense, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we've gone through all the awful details of what he did, the trials, even heard his last words. But I still keep coming back to why. Like, what could make a person do such horrible things?
That's the big question, right? And it's something that's baffled, like, everyone, criminologists, psychologists, everyone forever, basically. There's no easy answer when it comes to serial killers. No one profile fits them all.
So where do we even start trying to understand a mind like Richmond's? It's like, how do you even approach that?
Well, one way is to look at the bigger picture, the patterns and theories that come up when you study a lot of these cases.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like, lots of researchers think that a messed up childhood, abuse, neglect, that kind of stuff, it can play a big role in someone becoming violent later on.
So, like, early trauma can set the stage for brutality later in life.
It's a common thread, for sure. These early experiences, they can really mess up how a person sees the world. They might not be able to form healthy relationships or develop, like, a sense of right and wrong. And some end up detached from others, no empathy, and they see violence as a way to, like, control everything around them.
It's like their way of coping.
Exactly. But with Richmond, we don't really know much about his childhood, right?
Right, that's a missing piece.
Yeah, and without that, it's tough to say for sure what role, if any, early trauma played. But even without that specific info, there are other psychological factors that are, well, Pretty common in serial killer profiles.
Like what? I'm curious.
Ever heard of the McDonald triad?
Maybe. Refresh my memory.
Basically, it's three behaviors that, if you see them together in a kid, it can be a warning sign. Bedwetting past a certain age, setting fires, and cruelty to animals.
Whoa, those are pretty intense.
Yeah, they're red flags. Not like a guarantee, but definitely something to pay attention to.
It's like they're signaling something's wrong, right?
Right, it's not just a random thing. It points to, like, deeper emotional or psychological problems. It's a sign that maybe the kid needs professional help before things get worse.
Early intervention, yeah. But I guess, sadly, a lot of times these signs are missed.
Yes, it's true. And the consequences, well, they could be awful, like in this case. So even though we don't have all the details about Richmond's childhood, there are things about his crimes, the way he acted, that do line up with some of these patterns.
Okay, I'm following you. What are you thinking of?
Well, remember how he confessed, and he admitted to leaving clues, like he actually wanted to get caught. That's not normal, right?
No, most criminals want to stay hidden, like blend in and not get caught, obviously.
Exactly. But for some serial killers, it's all part of the thrill, the need for attention. They want to be recognized. It's about power and control. It gets mixed up with the crime itself.
It's so messed up, but it makes sense in a weird way.
And with Richmond, that drill sergeant background, it maybe made that need for control even stronger. He was used to being the one in charge, the authority figure.
Right, giving orders, not taking them.
Exactly. So maybe all that, plus whatever else was going on in his head, it all just, built up to this horrible breaking point.
So no easy answer for why he did it.
No, it's probably a whole mix of things. Trauma, the need for control, who knows what else. It's a puzzle of a lot of missing pieces. But even looking at these pieces, it helps us understand a little bit more about the darker side of human nature.
Definitely makes you think. But as we're wrapping up here, I'm left wondering, what happens now? Richmond's gone, but his crimes, they had such a huge impact. What can we learn from this? How can we stop something like this from happening again?
Those are the questions we should all be asking ourselves. I mean, this case, it shows us that evil can be anywhere, hidden in plain sight. It's a reminder that mental health matters and that we need to be there for each other. Build a society that cares.
A society where people can talk about these things openly without shame.
Absolutely. The more we understand about the human mind, the better chance we have of preventing these kinds of tragedies.
Well said. So as we close out this deep dive on Earl Richmond Jr., I hope it leaves you thinking and maybe, a little bit more aware.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.